Dear friends, my name is Pastor Enoch Lavender, and in this message, I'd like to share with you what I feel that Paul himself is saying to those of us who are experiencing lockdown right now. Now, obviously, Paul the Apostle in his day was not writing to anyone facing coronavirus or a lockdown of an epidemic. However, he wrote to a specific situation in his society, which in some ways parallels what some of us are experiencing. So he wrote to the people known as bondservants. And bondservants in the Roman world were known basically as people in chains. 1/3 of the population of Italy were slaves. 1/5 of the entire empire were slaves. Some were slaves because they're on the losing side of a war, others via piracy, others were born into it. The slave markets were everywhere, and it was humiliating. And slaves were the lowest class. And they basically had no rights, even to create their own relationships or family, and could not own property. And they were basically treated like furniture that could speak. In other words, the life for slaves was grossly unfair, limiting, dehumanizing, and they had lost their rights. So what does he say to these people, and how does that relate to you and I today? It's interesting that the slaves, some of them, went into riots and they protested what was unfair and they tried to gain freedom through their own strength. But their rights were brutally crushed. Others protested by working slowly, stealing or sabotaging from their masters. But Paul, in addressing servants who had come to faith, he had a different word and a different attitude to say, and I believe this applies to you and I today as believers who are experiencing lockdowns, who are experiencing the loss of some of our rights, at least temporarily during this lockdown, that we will have the right attitude in the midst of this season. So the text I'm taking is from Ephesians 6:5 and from Colossians 3, which basically says, "Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart as to Christ, not with eye service, as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, do the will of God from the heart, with good will doing service as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord, whether he is a slave or free." I won't read the Colossians 3 text right now, but we're going to see it as we go through this message. So what does he say? Firstly, he describes the people as masters. So the masters of the slaves. And the word master here is kurios, which is a title of honor and reverence. So straight away from the very get-go, as he's talking to these slaves here, is explaining the need for them to have an attitude of honor and reverence towards their masters. Now, did they all have fair and just and wise masters? No, they didn't. I'm sure many experienced oppression and even evil at the hand of their masters. Yet Paul wanted the slaves to treat them with honor and respect. And how much more you and I today? Whatever country you are in, as you're listening to this, you may have a government that's really righteous and doing the right thing, or you may have a government that is very anti-God in its entire approach and even how it handles the lockdown. But whatever the government that's above you, you and I are to treat them with honor and reverence. I see many Christians and even friends of mine who are speaking out against the government. And yes, we can debate the policy and debate the things that are happening, but the attitude that's coming out is one of criticism, is one of pride, and even use of derogatory language to attack those in charge, to slam them and to pull them down. But that is not the attitude that Paul wanted these people to have, and I don't think that we should have that attitude as well. So don't just tick all the right boxes. He says that they're to serve their masters not with eye service as men pleasers. In other words, they weren't just to obey the rules when people were watching and do their own thing apart from that, but they were to do it all the time as unto the Lord. And when we are facing this situation where our rights have been taken away, we can feel a kind of resentment, and out of that resentment will come an unwillingness to obey. And maybe we will obey as long as the police are watching. But as soon as they turn their backs to us, we'll do our own thing. But Paul wants us to do what is right according to our masters, whether they are watching or not. And he goes on to say to do it in sincerity of heart. Or another way of translating that phrase is generosity of heart. Now, sometimes we have situations where there's a lot of demands placed on us. And I've had a business customer lately who's kept on asking me for more and more details and more information about what I'm doing. And above and beyond what I would normally expect from a customer. They become very demanding. They've put together an entire committee to look at the work I'm providing with them on a secular level. And it's been really challenging for me. And I've tended then to grumble in my heart. And I've been dragging my feet in terms of doing what they want me to do because I've felt it's been excessive. But this is no longer a generosity of heart. This is a meanness of spirit that only ticks the boxes instead of going above and beyond what I'm asked to do in order to help and to ultimately honor God in what I do. More about the attitude. He talks about obeying the masters with fear and trembling, fearing God. In other words, we do it as unto God, knowing that, on the one hand, if our attitudes are wrong, He will deal with it. On the other hand, as our attitudes are right, He will reward us. We are ultimately serving Him. And we see this also in the same passage where it says that we are to do it as unto Christ. And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord and not to men. So from our heart we are to serve. From our heart we are to do what we are asked to do, whether it seems fair or not, whether we like it or not. But we do it with all our heart, as if the Lord Jesus Himself asked us to do it. It's interesting, at the beginning of this year, there was a prophetic word released. This was New Year's Eve 2019, heading into 2020. The word was released from an African preacher, and he was saying that he felt God was saying for this year ahead, the word was that we were to be like the Israelites in Egypt. And they were told, when the plague came, they were to stay indoors. And he said that was the word he felt for this year. And how appropriate is that? Now I know that some of us have been very upset with what has been going on, and we've taken to the streets to demonstrate our anger. But I keep remembering that word that said, stay indoors until the plague has passed. And let's do this as unto the Lord and not to men, with our whole heart as unto Him. What would you do if Jesus Himself asked you to do a menial task? We would do it with all our heart if He stood straight in front of us. So let's do whatever we do as unto Him. What is God's will for my life? We often talk about finding and identifying God's call for us and being involved in ministry, whether that is serving in a church, speaking from the pulpit, leading worship, leading a Bible study, and we have a focus on doing activities in the church, and that's all well and good. But what about these guys? In the days of Paul, the bondservants, they couldn't travel anywhere. They couldn't serve God as missionaries in a faraway country. Perhaps they even couldn't go to a local congregation and be actively involved in ministry. So did that mean they were missing God's will and God's plan for their lives? Well, Paul goes on to say to them that you are to do even these menial tasks that they're asked to do as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, with goodwill doing service as to the Lord and not to men. In other words, the will of God for them in their lives, in that time and in that season, was simply to do what they were asked to do. And even if that meant they were stuck peeling potatoes day in and day out, in so doing they would be serving God Himself. And they would not be missing out on the will of God for their lives. Sometimes we can be so zealous for being involved in some public ministry setting that we are not appreciating what God has for us, even in the day-to-day aspects of life. So God wants us to serve Him and to have the right attitude in this season. And there is a reward. Ephesians says that whatever good anyone does, he will receive the same from the Lord. And in Colossians it says you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. In other words, there is a reward as we serve him. Even as we are stuck in lockdown mode, we can serve him in our homes and we will experience and can enter into the reward. Now, as I was looking at this text, I was really challenged because I recognized that in my heart I had been grumbling about the lockdown. I had been abiding by the rules, doing all the right things, but my heart was not happy about it. And as this spirit of grumbling was beginning to fester in my heart, my personal finances began to drain up. My work that I've been involved with began to slow down, and things began to get really tight. Now, personally, I've experienced abundance in this time. Finances come in and everything's been good. But as soon as my attitude changed, the blessing was no longer there in this season of lockdown. Now, we are all going through a trying and difficult time during the lockdown. Many of us are impacted financially. But as we keep our attitude in line with the attitude God has for us, an attitude of trusting him, an attitude of serving him in the day-to-day things of life, even serving him at home right now in the lockdown, I believe we can walk in the blessing God has for us, and we'll see the finances released, the blessings released in every area that we need. So that's my challenge for you today, to walk in an attitude of trusting God in this season. So thank you for listening, and if you'd like to know more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or go to our website pastorenoch.com.au for other resources or to support our ministry. God bless you.